Ladies and gentlemen, this is a tired David Mirikitani with Mark Ostrander and Grant Turner. We are weighing in, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and sponsored by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. The boys are back in town. GT is back in America. Hide the women and children. I just got done loading, unloading 2 trucks and a bunch of other stuff like that in the last 48 hours. First of all, guys, it's good to see you again. It's the last 48 hours felt about like a week. Everybody have a good weekend?
It was great. Got a chance to catch back up. Got a chance to actually relax a little bit. So it was a good weekend.
Yeah, you and I chatted a little bit on like Friday night before all the festivities started on my end. So, Marco, how about you? Everything good?
Yeah, I want to shout out to my brother Jim. He's celebrating his 60th birthday today, so shout out to him.
That's awesome. Your brother's a good dude, man. He always
he's a good guy.
He always takes care of me at NCA. So much love to Jim. So
he's a good guy.
We voted, and I was outvoted. So we're going to talk about Border Brawl first. Mark, you watched it, I think. You told me at least some of it. So
yep.
Tell me how it looked on the IA Wrestle Rockfin channel, optics, setup, matches. What were your thoughts on it?
I thought they did a good job. I thought the wrestling was fantastic. I think it's kind of, I think you were talking about maybe next year changing the date because some of the guys that you probably would have enjoyed having there are going to be at Super 32s. But besides that, I thought it was a great event. I'm glad Randy was able to make it down for his charity. So, anything we can do to build wrestling, David, and, you're a pioneer in that. So, more power to you.
Yeah, just so people know, we're talking about the Missouri Border Brawl, which we're recording this on Monday, the 18th. It was yesterday, the 17th. One of our primary sponsors is Nike Wrestling. And, I called Grant this morning and just literally thanked him from the bottom of my heart because the kids love the gear, the 2-piece, really 3-piece, the compression tops, the shorts, and they also got quarter zips. And then we also were able to work on a deal with Nike where every person that attended got a Nike dry fit Missouri Border Brawl shirt. And so my mom was one of the people handing those out, and she told me the reactions, like when people came back, what they did when they came in, they got 2 tickets, one to get in and one to get their shirt. Then we sent them to the back to get their shirt, and they were like, this is the free shirt. Like, oh my God. So GT private thanks are nice, but public thanks are deserved. The credibility of our event definitely jumped levels when we partner with you and Nike and Shane. So thank you very much.
Our pleasure, man.
So for people that don't know, we had 20 matches. The final score was 42-36. There weren't that many pins. There were a ton of really high quality 1-2 point matches. The outstanding wrestlers were Faith Cole from Lafayette, Missouri, who's undefeated in her high school career. And then a young man, Dragan Arini from Seckman High School, who beat Sam Smith in the main event. And that was a really good match. I encourage you guys to watch. I know Super 32s are coming up. You're going to get to see a lot of great high school wrestling. There were some really good matches on here. Maybe some names people know. Jackson Randall, Zach Randall's son, beat Max Magana, which was an interesting match because it was 0-0. And then Magana rode him out in the second period. And then Zach pig neutral and then ended up winning the match on his feet. But I mean, he got rode hard. I didn't know if he was going to be able to come through. The Stillwater kids really wrestle well. Ladarian Lockett, Angelo Ferrari, Aiden Thomas, JJ McComas all really wrestle well. Whitfield had 3 kids in the meet, and 2 of them wrestled really. All 3 wrestled well. 2 of them won. The third one lost a really close match to Cale Lordson. We did a social on Saturday night, and Grant's been involved in a lot of these kind of things. It's fun to just talk to the dads and coaches, and so. I got a chance to meet Jim Lordson. George Ivanoff was there. Scott Fugit, a couple of the kids' dads were there. And I would be remiss if I don't publicly thank Jason Keck, the vice president of the Border Brawl. He put a lot of the matchups together. He did a lot of the work. He doesn't ask for any credit, doesn't ask for any money, and really did a lot of the heavy lifting this year, especially when I was out with COVID and pneumonia. I was actually ready to just give the money back to our sponsors and pray to God that Grant stayed my friend in the middle of August. I was so sick. I didn't know if we were going to be able to pull it off. And we pulled it off, and it went really well. It was a cool venue. The place got really loud. So it's always a big sigh of relief. I always tell people that event, any event, I think anybody's ever run one, I would guess Frank Papalizio probably feels this way. Once it starts, it kind of takes on a life of its own, and there's very little you can do. You just kind of get out of the way and make sure everybody's having a good time. So that was fun. Now we get back to the real world. And so we touched on this, but the big news that came out, we actually broke this 5 weeks ago, and they deleted it off of our podcast because we weren't supposed to break it. But USA is wrestling Iran, and Oklahoma State is hosting Iowa in Texas Rangers Stadium in February. I think for most people that date is districts or sectionals, depending on what state you're in. I think it's the Valentine's Day weekend, like February 12th, something around there. So, but really cool venue. Mark, you and I talked about it briefly, so I'll start with you, GT. You guys will obviously be involved in this with USA Wrestling, and Oklahoma State and Iowa are both Nike schools, so there'll be a lot of Nike in that building, which is awesome. I'm sure you heard about this well before the news became public. So, what are your thoughts on finally hearing it announced?
Well, I think perennial powerhouses with Iowa and Oklahoma State being able to combine for a new venue, old rivalry, new location. So I think it's a really cool way to expand the sport of wrestling, especially with those two fan bases that would then travel extremely well for something like this. Anytime that you can get out of Iowa in February, it's a good time. Get away from the snow, the sleet, the rain. Very, very cool to head down to Dallas and watch this type of event. And then for those two schools, I think both of them are title contenders, so it's gonna be fireworks 1 month out from NC2As. So very excited about the timing of the event because you're really getting the best look of those guys to the NCAAs and conference tournament. So very excited for this event.
Yeah, I think you watch stuff like this and you want to see people being creative. Iowa obviously did it in Kinnick. We talked about this briefly, me and Tony Hager and Adam Fellers on the Hager Happy Hour, I think is what they call that show, which is a little bit different than ours.
Yeah, just a little bit, David.
A little bit different. I went on there Thursday. They let me promote Brawl. But, we also talked about wrestling subjects, and this was one of them. Those guys do a great job, by the way. They were very accommodating. I need to thank, too, Tony Hager and Bill and Corby. Those guys from IA Wrestle did a fantastic job. Smoke machines, the whole nine. Lori May, our PA announcer, RDJ, my DJ, the referees that donated their time, just a bunch of people that did things. So I don't want to spend a whole podcast thanking everybody, but I probably should. So we'll put it out on social and thank everybody. But anyway, so this thing that, first of all, there's a lot of different storylines here, right? Like GT touched on the fact that it's Iowa, Oklahoma State. Some people do not understand this thing they're doing in Florida around Christmas. That's not a national duels. They're doing pools. Teams have already told the host who they do and don't want to wrestle. So it's not really a tournament because there's certain teams that aren't going to wrestle each other no matter what. So people need to understand that there's going to be 4 pools of 3. You wrestle everybody in your pool, and then you cross over with one other pool. But for example, if I don't want to wrestle Grant, my pool does not cross over with Grant's if that's what we agreed to. So Iowa getting to wrestle Oklahoma State is a big hit. Those schools hit. They always draw well to Carver. They always draw well to Gallagher. Mark and I talked about the duel, I think, on Thursday, and we'll obviously have plenty of time to break that down. Clearly, Iowa's favored. If it went Oklahoma State's way, they could probably go 5-5. it's going to be awfully hard to overcome the bonus that you would think would come for them at 25 and 41, at least for Iowa. But, Iowa's on a roll. It seems like, I don't want to get into it. It seems like they've now signed 27 guys for recruiting that are all supposed to be pretty good. So they are not rebuilding, they're reloading. So, but yeah, that's a big meet. And then let's talk about the US Iran part of it, because that's important, right? Like what are some of the things there, Mark? You mentioned like maybe Dayton double dipping. Like, what do you see happening there?
I'm hoping Gables, he's already kind of called out the Iranian heavyweight that won the world's 2 weeks ago.
Zaire, yeah.
So he said he was pulling up, so he's ready to go. So come on in. So, I mean, I think that itself would be a phenomenal match. I would love to see it. I think it'd be great for the sport. It'd be great for both countries to see those two go at it. Iran brings in a very talented team. Because during the Worlds, David, and I know Grant was there, we thought Iran had a really good shot at winning the Worlds at one time when they went 16-0 in that one day, and they just pretty much mopped everybody. I'm sorry, I got a cold. I've been came down with it this weekend, so I'm trying to get better. But anyway, that'd be a great match. I think there's some great matches, and there's rumors going around that maybe Dayton will wrestle them both because they're going to wrestle one match, Oklahoma State, Iowa, and then the next match is going to be a freestyle match between USA and Iran, and then go back to Oklahoma, Iowa. So, I mean, they could spread it up where he could wrestle the first match and then wrestle maybe the last match in freestyle. So, and I think that would be an unbelievable opportunity.
So let's talk about the logistics of that, because to me, a dual meet, there's a flow to it, right? And so now, like, if you're chopping it up, it's really hard for a team to get momentum in either case. The other thing is that team scoring is really different in freestyle dual meets versus folk style dual meets.
Yep.
And then you're going to have different referees, you're going to have different referee uniforms. And Grant, you would know this probably the best of the three of us. And maybe I'm wrong. I don't think the mats are exactly the same. I don't even know if the mat dimensions are the same, are they?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're still in a 28-foot circle. It's just the passivity zone versus, whatever the yeah. I mean, as far as the dimensions of the mat, I think we'll be just fine. But the flow of the duels would be interesting from the standpoint of like, folk style, freestyle, and then of course having the three-man mechanics versus the two-man mechanics of the officials.
Yeah,
because a duel like that, they're gonna have two officials. There's not just gonna be one guy trying to hold. He's gonna have some back.
They need four officials for Iowa, Oklahoma State. One official, a side guy, and one guy to keep each coaching staff in their corners, because neither one of them stay. That should be four-man mechanics for that folk style duel. So I think we're planning on being there, right? GT, sure. I know you'll be there for sure. And I've already talked to USA Wrestling about being there, ideally doing a pod, like a live pod from that day. And maybe if you can get away from your Nike duties for 20 minutes, we could get you on with us. The most interesting part of it to me is the momentum. Like, I know it's like being the opening act, right? Like if it's, if we're traveling, you want to be the main event. Like I don't want to open for Grant. He doesn't want to open for me because by definition, the last one's the big deal. I will tell you this. I talked to Gary Abbott. He literally said it was fine to say this on the air. He goes, one Iranian fan makes about the same noise as 5 to 10 American fans. So we need American fans there. He made a big point of saying that. Grant, you were at the Worlds where the Iranian fans were going crazy. Is Mr. Abbott's noise ratio thermometer pretty accurate on that?
Yeah, I mean, the Iranian wrestling fans all over the world are, I mean, they all cheer. I remember in 2015 when the World Cup came to LA, I bet you they can make 5,000 Iranians sound like 50,000 Iranians inside a venue. And if you could watch the play, or if you watch the live stream of the World Championships, all of those fans are from the country of Norway. Like, those guys traveled from all over Norway to watch the Iranian wrestling teams participate in Oslo. They love wrestling, just flat out. So I know that Americans love wrestling as well. So I would love to see the chants go back and forth inside a baseball stadium, and it would be an epic showcase of just wrestling fans together. But yes, Gary Abbott's assessment is absolutely correct. Those guys, those fans know how to make a ruckus. They have a good time.
And, we always have to make economic decisions, right? Like, was this worth this and this worth that? And how much money do I want to spend for my family? Or I think, I don't know if it's USA Iran added Oklahoma State, Iowa, or Oklahoma State, Iowa added USA Iran. I don't want to say it. The fact that they came together, the fact that it's 20 matches and 2 duels instead of 10 matches and 1 duel, I think greatly increases the value proposition that you're getting for your ticket, you're getting for your hotel stay, you're getting for your travel, whatever the case may be. I will put this out there. If they want to do it again, St. Louis is kind of halfway between Oklahoma and Iowa. We love to have y'all in Busch Stadium. We figure out a way to make it work. It's Chris Roseman Sports Commission. We can do this. Let's go. I jumped in that little post, GT, that you were on. I think Andrew Space, the one that started it, Twitter post or whatever the case may be. But we were, I think it's something that would be super interesting, to do. And people shoot their shots. Like, I've tried to do some of these things. Some have succeeded more than others. Anybody that's trying to do something cool, I think we need to support, because it's hard to do. And there's a lot of logistics, and there's just a lot of things that go into it. Like little simple things like walkout music, that kind of stuff is really, it adds to the experience for the fan, for the athlete, whatever. So that'll be something that's really, I'm fascinated to see it. I don't know if this is the right way to do it. I would love to see them do like 5 matches of Duel A and then 5 matches of Duel B, and then go back to 5 matches of Duel A and close out with 5 matches of Duel B. But I also get, if they do it the way they're doing it, no one's going to leave till the end, and that's probably part of it. So, and the other thing that's important, if people haven't read the press release, they should. It's all over the mat.com, whatever else. Iran is sending their ones, their number ones. And Rich Bender said America's going to send their ones. And that's where, like, Mark's point is excellent, because Dayton is a number 1 at 61 kilos. I guess Gable's technically not a number 1 right now, because he didn't go to the 2021 World Championships, but I'm sure they'd figure out a special wrestle off if they did that. But there's at least one guy with college eligibility that's a number 1. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else. Well, Yanni, right? Yanni is our world team member. Yep. So, yep. I mean, Gilman's post-grad, Dayton undergrad, Yanni undergrad, JG post-grad, Jake post, Burroughs post, Taylor post, Jaden post, Snyder post, and then maybe heavy, or 280, 125. So there's like 2.5 right now. And so it's also be interesting if you're Yanni's coach, do you let him go do that, right? Like, you recruited him to win matches for Cornell. So, and then if you let him do it, well, now he needs to train freestyle, and that may impact his, wrestling for a national title. And then the rumor is he's going to go 49 and Josh is going to go 41. And he'd have to pull the 65, although I'm sure they're going to give him 2 or 3 kgs. Isn't that what you would guess, GT, on a meet like that? That the freestyle meet would probably be a 2 or 3 kg allowance. It's not going to probably be scratched, right?
I would assume it'd be a 2 kilo allowance. That's what a lot of international friendlies are.
Yeah. So that gets him up to like 147.5. So then that part's not as much of a deal. You cut an extra 1.5 pounds. So,
and another thing, David, we're not even thinking about, does Cornell, do they have duels that weekend?
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. Minnesota's got to have a duel that weekend. The Big Ten's duel every weekend. So they've got a duel. We could pull up their schedule if we need to. But yeah, we're not missing that. That's what I'm saying. Like, hey, this is a thing. We need to look at that, but obviously we've got really good guys at those weights. If it's not those two guys, like a Joey McKenna and a Nick Gwizdowski could wrestle. So anyway, so it's fascinating stuff. The big event coming up this weekend is Super 32s. I would consider myself an expert at nothing, but the thing that I follow probably the most is college wrestling. I know Mark would definitely say that's what he follows the most. GT, I know you know college, wrestling period, but you're more of an international guy. So there's several people that are putting out great articles. Obviously, Flo has the event. I think Willie lives in the college universe or high school universe more than anybody could possibly imagine. So there's a ton of great articles, but I will just tell you this from what I'm reading, and maybe we can just talk about a big picture. Super 32s have really become sort of the Fargo of folk style. There's training camps built around it. There's kids peaking for it. A lot of the kids that came to my meet wanted to get a match, wanted to get a weigh-in in, wanted to get a scrap in before Super 32s. It's one of the reasons why they came to the meet. Like, hey, I don't want to go in there cold, not having wrestled for 2 months. So, and GT and I spoke this morning, and they've moved that. They used to be in Greensboro, and now it's in Virginia Beach at the same venue that they hold NHSCAs or did for years, right, Grant? I think he may be frozen. So, or I don't know if you heard me. GT is it the same venue that the high school nationals ran out there in Virginia Beach? Okay. So anyway, Marco, you can hear me, right?
Yeah, I think I thought I saw something that they are at Greensboro again, but I could be completely wrong. So, but yeah, that's going to be a phenomenal tournament. So
it's loaded, and
I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, I talked to Keck. I'm probably going to go next year. He said it's just worth going and being a part of it, and so I probably will. And he'll have some kids I can help coach. We're going to make an announcement about an RTC thing coming up here in the St. Louis, St. Charles area in the next couple months. That's over a year in the making. Just COVID has delayed it, but which is something I'm excited about.
Sure.
So it'll probably impact that as well. So, but a lot of, I will tell people this, like it's like in any sport, right? Like the college guys and the college girls and the Olympic, they all started out being good younger. Like, it's like football, right? Like if you're an Alabama fan, how many 5-star guys did they sign? Because that's who's going to replace, the Devontae Smiths and the Mac Joneses of the world. So that's important. So I would encourage people, if you're a Penn State fan, you're an Iowa fan, you're an Oklahoma State fan, go on this weekend and watch these kids that have already committed to you, or watch the kids that are still out there. There's always a couple kids that come through that tournament that nobody thought was that good, that go on a run and make themselves a lot of money. And, GT, you're still recruiting. I've always argued the tournament that a kid can make the most money on is his junior year at Fargo Freestyle. If you win that thing before your senior year, the junior tournament, not the cadet tournament, the junior tournament, you probably write your own check. But that Super 32s is kind of fast becoming sort of 1B to that 1A. Is that, as a guy that's in that world still, is that how you see it, or is it a different perspective from your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go there in your place and you were like under the radar, now you're on everybody's radar, especially the NCAA Division I. All of the, I would say, D2, D3, NAIA, JUCO guys is like, I hope that those guys go there, beat a whole bunch of good dudes, but like stay underneath the radar just enough so that no one's like giving them a phone call. But, I think for those kids, it's an opportunity to go, basically beat somebody they're not supposed to, or like go make a name for themselves. And any opportunity that you have the ability to go do that it is a good option for those athletes to go get, looks and other people that might be interested in that weren't interested in them previously. So, I mean, same goes for, like Fargo, like all of a sudden you're an All-American, you're on everybody's radar. If you go beat somebody that was ranked in, the rankings, it's a great opportunity, but you got to go to those places that have those guys. So yeah, looking forward to, Super 32s is a place that you can definitely do that.
Yeah. And it's fun. I started laughing when you said that, because when I was recruiting, we'd go to Virginia Beach and we had a kid, like we knew we had him. And then like he'd go beat the number 2 guy in the country. And I'd call my dad, like, well, we just lost so-and-so. Then he'd get beat by nobody. I'm like, we might get so-and-so again. Like some of those kids, if you know about them, you don't want anybody else to know about them. Like we had Kendrick Maple coming out of high school because no one knew about it. He was like a 2-time state champ out of Kansas, but he hadn't wrestled on the national platform. It wasn't that he hadn't beaten anybody like really good. He hadn't wrestled anybody really good. I mean, it all the way to the semis and lost to Dake. I just called my dad. I go, we lost Maple. He goes, where's he going? I go, not Merrimack. Like, it's not going to Merrimack. Like DT got that knowing smile, like, yeah, you're not going to Grandview. Like without, we shot our shot, but that ain't gonna happen.
Like
so
or it just got really, really, really difficult to hold on to them.
Yeah. But like those guys, nobody grows up thinking about wrestling junior college. Like that's not their goal, right? Their goal, for everybody's goal, like you said, GT, you went to Iowa State, I went to Iowa State. Like you want to go to a place like that coming out. So if those people talk to you, you figure the money out. Kids always figure the money out. The families always figure the money out. They just need to be, they need a chance. So, and it is, yeah, you can, the word is this though, basically the lesson is this. Kids know this, kids peak for this event, because it's a proving ground, right? Like, a lot of college rankings are hard to do. It's sort of a good natural segue because we're probably going to get into some college weights and we did rankings. College rankings are very difficult to do. And there's a lot of common opponents in Division I. Like doing JUCO rankings were really hard. I would imagine NAI rankings are really hard. Like a Grandview may never wrestle like a Menlo or somebody like that. Like Merrimack or an Iowa Central. Well, I shouldn't say Iowa Central. I'll say Merrimack. Like we never wrestled a Clackamas. We never wrestled a Nassau. I know Iowa Central had a different schedule and saw some of those schools, but so for us, it was like a common opponent. Like, okay, we won or lost versus the Iowa Central kid, and the Iowa Central kid won or lost, to the Clackamas kid or the Nassau kid. And so you have to connect them. There's no head-to-heads. There's just all these, it's like 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon when you're doing rankings. So, and that's high school rankings is even worse if these kids don't go to these national tournaments, because you don't know if a 3-time state champ from Iowa is better or worse than a 3-time state champ from Missouri. And that's, that's a thing, that's why I like events like Super 32s, events like Border Brawl are, they help because you sync kids up, you match kids up, and people are able to do that. So we've got like 15 minutes left here. And I think normally what we do is we do the charts for all the rankings. And my guy, Christian Thompson over at Fantasy Grade puts that spreadsheet together for us. So a couple things, we'll just talk big picture about rankings. Last year, I think, Mark, we did it. We did the rankings from open mat, inner mat, flow,
track wrestling,
and win. And track, I'm pretty sure is not going to do rankings this year. There's really no reason for them to, because they want to steer all the traffic towards flow. So it'll probably be 4 sources. 3 of the sources that we chart are out right now. Intermat, they came out early. Win came out second. Flow just came out yesterday, I believe. It looks like on the date. I was a little busy yesterday, so I didn't see that. But everyone has a different criteria. So I'm going to tell you, we're going to tell you what Mark and I did for criteria. Maybe we can discuss whether or not that's the right criteria or not. This was my criteria, or our criteria. I don't know if Mark agreed with it all 100% of the time, but this is for the preseason. This is what we did. We went by where you placed at nationals. And the reason why we did that is if you talk about all the great wrestlers, like I don't care if I beat Grant 4 times in the regular season. If he won the national tournament, he's the number 1 guy. I also believe that that's what an athlete would care about, because Grant's the youngest one of us. If I said to GT, you have 2 choices. You can go 21-0 and go 0-2 at nationals, or you can be Mark Branch and go 8-9 and then go win nationals. I don't think it's a very hard decision on which one you'd want to be. So, we went off of that. We start with the rankings, everybody that came back. We've talked about this. This might be the hardest year to do at least initial rankings because no one had to graduate. No one had to be done. So all these kids are back. All the Ivy League kids that were forced to sit out are back. And then you have your usual treasure trove of freshmen coming in that are freaking hammers. So I would say this, whoever has rankings, give these people the benefit of the doubt. Like there's a couple we've seen and we're not quite sure we agree with how they did it, but that's okay. I think the only time it's not okay is if you don't have a consistent methodology. Probably the one that stands out the most is like, where do you rank an Alex Marinelli, right? Like there's some people that rank an Alex Marinelli really high. You know, he was the #1 seed, I think, this past year at Nationals, made it to the quarters, lost to Griffith, and then defaulted out. So he essentially took 9th through 12th. So that's a good example. For us, assuming no one moved up or down a weight, no freshmen came in, no one came off of red shirt, and say no one graduated, we would rank him 9th. That's what we would do, right, Mark? That's how we would do it in the preseason?
That's the way we did it in the past, yes.
Yes. And I remember I talked to Andy Hamilton one year, like he wanted me to rank Alex Meyer ahead of Leland Weatherspoon because he had beaten him all those times. But Weatherspoon had placed at Nationals and Meyer had not. And I said, this is our process. And you can say it's a dumb process, but as long as you're consistent, I think people have respect for your process. I mean, there's other folks that have got, and I'm not saying we're right or wrong. I'm just saying Marinelli's a guy that we would have, or I would have ranked a lot differently. So let's start with that. You know, Mark, it was sort of my process. I don't know that you necessarily agreed with it. Like, do you think it's right? If it's not, and that's okay, how would you change it?
Well, it's not that I don't think it's not right. That's the process that we came up with. And I think you have to go by that. I think once, and we're just talking, I think people need to understand, David, we're just talking about preseason. Nobody's wrestled a match yet this year. So this is just preseason where we would put them. Once they start wrestling, guys are going to move up and down depending on who they wrestle, so forth and so on. And they should have a full year this year, which is going to be different than last year. We're not going to wait until January to start wrestling. We're not just going to wrestle within our conferences this year. They're going to get to see these guys. So it's going to be much easier for these places that are doing the rankings. It's just, I've been looking at some of them already this year, obviously, because we're going to start getting into this. And I just shake my head. I don't understand it. So I want to figure out why they're doing it the way they're doing it. And, for a perfect example, and I think Flo's done a phenomenal job getting wrestling out there in front of the community. And I have nothing bad to say about Flo, but the rankings part of it, I think they're kind of skipping back and forth. They're kind of going different directions at different weights. And I think they need to go the same way at each weight. For example, at 197, Flo has Ferrari #1 at 97, which everybody agrees he's a returning national champion, should be #1. At #2, they have Max Dean, who's never wrestled a match at 97, was a runner-up at 184 3 years ago. Because they didn't wrestle, they didn't have nationals that next year, and then the next year they didn't even wrestle. So it's been 2 years and he's #2. #3, they have Jacob Warner. And I don't have a problem with Jacob Warner being #3 because he placed 4th last year. But they got Nick Bonacorsi, #4, who placed 2nd last year at Nationals. There's no rhyme or reason what they're doing right now at that weight or at some of the other weights. They got Alex Marinelli #3. I really don't have a problem with Alex being #3 because he didn't lose any other matches. He defaulted out. He had beaten everybody during the year, basically. So in that part, I don't have a problem with. as much, but you have to be consistent. So if I'm going to go one way, I got to go that way with every weight. So I wouldn't put Alex at number 3. Not that I don't think he's not be number, up there with the best of them, because I think he's that good if he's healthy, but you got to be consistent. And that's all that people want to know is, are you being consistent in your rankings?
Yeah. And so GT, I think there's a natural segue here. This is kind of what a lot of people complain about when they seed the national tournament. We're talking about the two opposite ends, right? Like this is the preseason. And we can certainly talk about, I'm going to make a quick point, and then I'm going to go to you about this seeding comparison. When we did rankings, you start with this, but the stuff you did last year, as it goes further and further in the rearview mirror, the more what happened this year counts more. Where that becomes an art and a science, there's not an equation to that. It's not like every week this counts this much less and this counts this much more. And that's where you can really have healthy debates. But to go to like the postseason seeding committee, and there's a formula, there's a rubric. And our buddy Alex Steen probably understands that rubric as well as anybody in the country. But the complaint that I've heard, and I think I shouldn't speak for you guys, but I think you've heard this, is that it doesn't feel like the seeding committee applies the rubric the same way to every weight. And so, Grant, you're in college wrestling and you're certainly in the D1 scene as much as anybody, with all the fingers and all the pots your fingers in and have real relationships with all these guys, like they're on the speed dial. What do you think about the comparison between how preseason rankings are done and how national tournament seedings are done?
Well, I think, specifically for the postseason, you got a body of work like that Mark was alluding to. You have a body of work that says, hey, this guy was the Cliff Keen Open Invitational. You have the Midlands champ, Scuffle champ, whatever it is, Big Ten champ or whatever. Like you have a body of work in order to like go behind. Now, there has been knocks where it's like, well, these guys come in with like, really, really, really high records, but haven't wrestled anybody. They're like 25-2. But they skipped all of those big contests, but they ended up being the conference champ of somewhere. So I think preseason rankings, it's a lot of, in my opinion, it's, you kind of go to the perennial powerhouses, very similar like how you would do it in, basketball or football. Like you're always going to see the new people kind of get a little bit more maybe credit than maybe some returning teams maybe, or returning athletes where it's like, well, they had a couple of great wins last year, but are they going to be able to follow that up? So, or highly touted freshmen. Some places will say like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden you got whoever it is coming out of high school and, he's automatically the 5 seed, who hasn't done anything yet.
Yes. So that last point, sorry, go ahead. I don't know. I might have lost you at the Wi-Fi. I've lost you, so I'm going to talk and just cut me off if you need to. So the point that you made about the freshman, like when Gable Stevenson came in, we didn't know where to rank him. We ranked him that year above Tanner Hall. Remember that, Mark? Because he had wrestled Tanner Hall in a freestyle match and beat him 10-0 and beat him with 5 takedowns. We're like, we can justify this. And a lot of it is just justifying. That's all there really is to it. There's a couple things that I was taking notes as you two guys are talking. The first of all is, and I think everybody understands this, but team rankings, tournament team rankings are really only the addition of the 10 individual rankings. So like Spencer Lee counts for 20 points because that's what you get for winning and advancing. So Iowa gets 20 for that. So if you make Max Dean second instead of say 7th or whatever, he gets 16 instead of saying 6.5. So when you see those team rankings, especially when you put him over Jacob Warner, and I'm not saying you should or shouldn't, I'm just saying Max Dean would be a very difficult one to rank because he sat out a year, he's up a weight, he's at a new school. The more variables, the more difficult it is. GT, you made a great point about these schools that don't all wrestle in the same tournament. I actually visited with Rocky Elam and Keegan O'Toole yesterday because they were the clinicians at our event. And they are excited to be in the Big 12. They're excited to be in the Big 12 tournament. They are excited. First of all, they're like, we're coming for heads. We're winning that thing, which is what you would expect them to say. It wasn't disrespectful. They're like, Coach, we're coming to win that thing. But say, for example, a Rocky Elam, he's going to get to wrestle like a Tanner Sloan, an AJ Ferrari, a Stephen Buchanan, the West Virginia kid, which was that 97 was the best weight at the Big 12s last year anyway. You know, like O'Toole's going to wrestle Whitlake in the regular season now or the Big 12 tournament. So it's going to be a lot easier to seed those Missouri kids. And we had the conversation like when you wrestle that other schedule, if you don't wrestle anybody ranked, it's almost bad because you can only drop. Like if you beat somebody, it's like in college football, right? Like if Alabama plays, I don't know, you know, like the University of like some one AA team, they can only like Appalachian State. When Appalachian State beats Michigan in football, that just kills them. Like it's hard to bounce back. So when these guys have these, you know, head on head with these big ones, that becomes a really big thing. So those are just a couple of things that are important for people to understand. Next week, we've got a few minutes left. We're going to dig in hard to the preseason rankings. We're going to talk to our guy, Christian, get our grid up. Mark, you and I have gotten very good feedback that what the grid does is we take the average of the 4 sources and then sort those averages out. Some of them are fairly apparent, like Spencer Lee will be 1, 1, 1, 1. So the average of that is 1. But other people like a Max Dean, it'll go all over. And then we kind of highlight, hey, here's his, it's almost like fantasy football weekly rankings, right? Like somebody has Justin Herbert as the number 2 quarterback this week, and somebody has him at the number 12 quarterback this week. So there's a lot of variance, you know.
I want to get one opinion from Grant. Grant, I want to give, because you've done this, you know, maybe not the rankings, but you've been through this quite a bit. Let's say at 125, we got Spencer Lee, we have Arujau, we have Patrick Glory, and we got Courtney. How would you rank those 4 guys starting the season out, just off the top of your head?
And Spencer Lee would be 1. I'd say Brandon Courtney 2, and then whoever won the last meeting between the 2 guys that sat out.
Okay.
I mean, that would be how I would do it to start, knowing that, hey, you give credit where credit's due to Brandon Courtney for participating last year, even though those other guys didn't have an opportunity. But that doesn't play any part into what the fall of 2021 will behold for Vito and or Glory. It's not their fault that the schools didn't compete, but
Correct.
Also Brandon Courtney's not his fault that none of those guys competed either. So I think you give Brandon Courtney the nod at 2. I think you find out whoever won between Vito and Glory from previous year, and that's how I would do 1, 2, 3, 4, and anybody else that would be in that mix.
Okay. Yeah, and that's kind of how we did it in the past. It's just, it's not being done by other publications right now that way. Some weights they are, some weights they're not. And that's kind of where it gets to be difficult when you're doing rankings. And even when you put them all together, it skews the numbers to a point where it makes it still difficult to justify why that person's there. Not that we don't think that that's probably how it will end up, because that's another part of this that we're not even talking about right now, is that we know, we've seen all these kids wrestle. We kind of know in the back of our head who the best guy is, that they're going to wrestle heads up. If I'm going to wrestle Courtney and I'm going to wrestle Arujau, I have an opinion who I think would win that match, but you got to kind of start somewhere. And when you start, you got to start and be consistent throughout.
It's really well said. And we literally got like a minute. So you guys make great points. The tricky thing is, like, let's say Mark took 2nd this year, Grant took 2nd, sort of 3rd 2 years ago, up a weight. So now what do you do? Like, and in that scenario, Mark is Trent Hidley, Grant is Miles Amin. You know, so like, what do you do there? Oh, by the way, one of those guys won an Olympic medal. You know, so like, how much does that play into it? So we got 30 seconds left. I want to thank everybody that came out this weekend. I want to thank all the people that sent calls, texts, emails, DMs, the whole thing, all the people involved from the top to the bottom. I'm lucky I get to be the face and figurehead of that, you know, but for Randy Couture, we thank the Grant Turners of the world. We thank all the people that literally made this event possible. And we thank everybody for watching and listening to Weighing In. I'm David Mirikitani for Mark and GT. We will talk to you all next week.